AI in an enterprise is like giving your team a Formula One car. The speed is absolutely thrilling, but you drop that same car into city streets without the guardrails and you are waiting for a crash to happen.
Hello and welcome to the Human After All podcast. Today I am delighted to have Manoj Mohan on as our guest. He is a seasoned engineering executive with over 2 decades of experiences leading large-scale software, data and AI transformations across some of the most respected technology companies, including Intuit, Meta, Apple and Cloudera.
Yeah. First of all, Juliette, thank you for that warm, beautiful introduction. If I go back to the beginning, I would say what drew me to engineering was mostly curiosity and impact. I grew up fascinated by how things worked at large scale and what it would really take for ordinary human beings to be able to perform tasks at that massive scale. So when I got an opportunity to start writing code and realized that machines can actually do something useful for people in terms of automating a manual task, I think that was a huge eye-opener for me. So that's how it got started. And over time, I think that curiosity just turned out into a career for me, working at all of these great companies. So even today, I think, what excites me the most, I would say, is, the ability to leverage technology to solve problems that matter to people, that are important to, organizations and companies. So that's what keeps me hooked even today. Yeah.
And can you give us a flavour of some of the projects you've worked on? You spoke about large scale. I'd love to get a bit of a flavour and a deeper understanding of these kind of projects.
Yeah, sure. So, I'll call out a few examples. So at Apple, I was helping scale and modernize systems and all of the data stack during the iPhone boom. Back at Meta, the role was more centered around protecting our communities from misinformation and clickbaits that would target senior citizens and problem statements along those lines. Back at Intuit, it was about embedding AI into everyday financial decisions and products to make those financial services easy to consume for all of the end users. So those were the kind of problems that I have been, dealing with. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so when we look at AI, was there a kind of defining moment when you realized that AI wasn't necessarily just another tool in your toolbox to fix some of the problems that you were encountering in these companies, but it was something that could just fundamentally change the way entire companies and industries operated?
Yeah. I think there was one moment that maybe I can call out. It was back at Facebook early on. And this is a time when we were rolling out AI ML workflows to minimize the distribution of any sort of suspicious content, to be able to detect misinformation, to be able to detect repeat offenders on the newsfeed ecosystem. And, our content evaluation and recommendation models, much like what you see today on YouTube, was truly transforming how people consumed content. Because if I call it out, up until that point in time, an end user could only discover content that they knew about, whereas now the machine learning models uncovered content that was personalized to the taste of the user, that the user was not even aware of up until that time. So the first time to see that happen was a huge eye-opener for me. And the analogy that I would use would be, like you going to a local supermarket store and instead of you searching for the grocery items are now searching for you because they know you are in the supermarket. So it was that fascinating to me, when I saw all of this happen in real time. And that was when I realized that AI is not just another tool in the toolbox when it comes to software and building systems. Truly,
AI's just come about. It's since the rise of ChatGPT, that's the beginning of AI. But actually, it does go way further back than that.
Actually, in that sense, I would say AI and machine learning has been around for ages, probably a good 40 30, 40 years. It's been used mostly to solve for massive use cases. Governments have been leveraging it and so on. But what I'm talking about are, when did we start to see these machine learning models be part of everyday products for most consumers? So that's the wave that we have seen over the last, I would say 2 decades or so.
Interesting. And you've said that scaling AI isn't about flashy demos, it's actually about discipline. What do you think is missing in the way most enterprises are currently approaching AI and what they want to do with AI?
Yeah, great questions. In my opinion, I think it's mostly the discipline around the basics. Too many companies get wowed by a flashy demo, and then they start to think that they've really cracked AI. An example I would quote, in my opinion, is AI pilots are more like concept cars. You can wow people on a test track. However, if you truly want to kind of leverage those concept cars, you have to invest in building the highways, building the traffic lights, and building all of the safety guardrails so that you can get probably, a million cars running smoothly without causing accidents. So that's how I see it. And maybe an example, if I were to quote, back at Meta, the big challenge wasn't just about leveraging a powerful model or picking the right model, the latest and the greatest model. It was making sure that the model deployed in production could actually run reliably every single day with all the right guardrails and prevent the spread of misinformation and things like that. So in my opinion, I think the shift in mindset from being able to experiment with AI to being able to engineer at scale, especially to gain the trust of end users and customers, I think that's, and doing it for the longer term is the bigger part of the challenge.
And when leaders in corporations rush to implement AI, what do you think is the biggest risk that they overlook? And can you share a story from a time that you were at a big company where speed created real challenges?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I would double down on that trust factor in terms of getting that implementation of the AI. When you move too fast with a shiny demo out the door, but if, let's say, your customers start to lose trust even once, then it's almost an impossible thing to win those customers back. So that's the most essential thing I would say. Not to lose your end user trust. To quote an example, I would say I would pick something from Meta post the 2016 elections, where Meta had a lot of bad PR from the election results and things like that. There was a rush to fix the misinformation problem, even internally as a team, as we were huddling up. We had powerful models ready to flag, bad content and things like that. But the real challenge was not about the speed. It was more about the accuracy and the guardrails. So if we move too fast and flag the wrong content, we would lose credibility with billions of users and regulators. If we move too slow, misinformation spread would continue. So it was like walking a tightrope. And, with that experience kind of taught me that speed without discipline, especially with AI, can, backfire big time. And the analogy that I would use is AI in an enterprise is like giving your team a Formula One car. The speed is absolutely thrilling, but you drop that same car into city streets without the guardrails, without the rules, or without even a pit crew, and you are waiting for a crash to happen. You're waiting for accidents to happen. So that's how I see it as a challenge.
I love the car analogy. And it's really simple. You spoke a bit about guardrails. Can you describe what you mean about guardrails and where you come up with the guardrails? So how does a project team or an enterprise come up with the guardrails, and how do they know that they're correct?
Yeah, great question. So, I call it as, I have a methodology and I call it as the GF framework. You can easily remember it as the three great factors. And what that defines is anytime when you're thinking about, AI in an enterprise, you got to ensure that you ground it, guard it, and govern it. Your AI workflows, you do these three things. And if you get these three things right, then your AI outcomes are going to be fast, fair, and faithful. So that's the three G's and the three F's that I refer to as the three great factors. Now, what do I mean by that, right? When I talk about grounding it, you want to ensure that your AI is grounded with clean, reliable, trustworthy data sources within your enterprise. And when you're embedding that AI into a product workflow, make sure to cite those trusted sources so that the end user understands as to why AI is suggesting a particular answer. And also make sure you build a feedback loop, a human feedback loop for that user to give you feedback anytime that answer is not relevant to the context. So that's the grounding it part. Now, guarding it is privacy, not as an afterthought, privacy baked in right from the word go. And this is very, very true in today's day and age because you have user sensitive data, you have, PII information that you do not want to feed to LLMs and AI unless you're talking about some specific system or some specific workflow and things like that. So how do you guard all of the right privacy related measures in place as part of your design, and how do you not reactively think about it is the second aspect of it. The third aspect, govern it, is all about how do you build all of those right monitoring metrics, be it to measure bias, be it to measure fairness, be it to measure your precision of your models, the data drift, and things like that. All of these, think of it as the bells and whistles. And if you get all of these things right, then chances are, your users are going to be happy with the outcomes that AI is going to, come up with. And with that, the user gains trust on the system, and that naturally translates to better product engagement, better product stickiness, and eventually better product revenue. So that's how I kind of try and frame it.
And from your perspective, what is the hardest part of building an AI system? Is it on the technology side, or is it the acceptance of, the human side of organizations and the understanding of what the AI can and can't do? How does that balance work?
Yeah. So initially, I was also of the opinion that the hardest part is the technology when it comes to, building models, cleansing data, or scaling the underlying infrastructure and things like that. And trust me, these are all tough problems. I'm not denying it. But in my experience, the answer to your question, I think, is the human side is even more harder. In most of my experiences, the challenge was less so about the algorithm or the code. It was mostly, or the bigger problem used to be aligning hundreds of people across, let's say, time zones, across cultural differences, across skill sets, so that we are all aligned and working in the same direction. So the technology part of the problem can definitely be solved with time in a timely manner, with time, with resources, with engineering skills, and so on. But being able to build the trust, being able to build a culture of responsible AI, being able to cultivate or inculcate a global team inspired to work late nights or to make tough trade-off calls, all of those are even more important when it comes to make or break success for an organization. So the way I frame it is you can debug a code related problem in a few hours or max in a couple of days, but building trust across a global team, across people, usually takes a lot longer, weeks, if not months. And that's where I see the real challenge.
Do you think that concern is that maybe is more challenging than actually just laying down the code?
It's a little bit, I would say, of the mindset. It's a little bit about the learning. it's a little bit about the technology stack and how well versed you're with that technology stack, and a little bit about the expectations. So, people often come from diverse background, diverse skill sets, and some different understanding, even when it comes to, responsible AI practices, guardrails, and things like that. So a mixture of all these factors is what typically translates into the overall culture, the overall engineering excellence, best practices, and all of it. And add on to it, I think AI itself is evolving every single day. Right? What you might have learned 6 months back might be outdated as of today, because there is something even better, even more exciting, even more powerful that's available. So how do you ensure that this cutting edge piece of technology that's evolving on a daily basis is understood and is implemented or applied along the same lines by every single individual in your organization? And we're not talking only about code, we are talking about best practices, we are talking about governance, we are talking about data stewardship, and several of those things. So that's where, I think getting that alignment, getting everybody to think along the same lines with a common set of principles, I think becomes important.
And just to illustrate that, maybe you can, tell us about a breakthrough moment in your career where a project just clicked and you saw, AI really delivering value.
Yeah. I can quote something along the lines of my own learnings from the responsible AI aspects, I would say. So this is back at my time at Meta, and the breakthrough moment was not necessarily about a speed or convenience as such. So this is post the 2016 elections. This information was everywhere, and the trust on the platform itself was at an all-time low. And as our team was working on all of these problems, leveraging AI ML to reduce the spread of false and harmful content, we started to see that our models started to successfully flag and downrank a lot of the misinformation campaigns over time. And that was a huge moment. We're talking about 2018, by when we had successfully built our models, trained our models, and they were able to downrank most of the misinformation campaigns. And to see that happen, I think, was a huge moment. We did see the real metrics improve with the subsequent 2019 midterm elections. That was an awesome thing to witness. And the underlying thing here is, it was not just the engineering or the piece of code that we had deployed to production. It was more about safeguarding all of that public discourse, because we're talking about democracy, we're talking about elections and things like that. So the revelation for me was that even though it was a few lines of code that we were deploying in production, it was translating to safeguarding democracy. The feeling was very different from any product launch. It was more like we were the standing guards, ensuring that suspicious content does not gain distribution over time. So that was the shift for me. AI moved from being a cool technology to actually being a civic responsibility with how we were deploying and how we were seeing the metrics and things like that.
Interesting. So, the systems that you've built have been used by more than 100 million people. It's a huge impact. What does it feel like to lead something on that scale?
Millions of people trust you to keep things running safely every single day, right? And one of the metrics that we closely assess for all of these massively scaled systems is high availability, right? 24 by 7 by 365 days, you cannot afford to have downtime, even if you wanted to launch a new feature, even if you wanted to upgrade the underlying tech stack, you do not have the liberty to take the system down. So we track it with high availability. And when you think about, the systems we built, at across Meta, across Intuit, all of that, we were shooting for 5 nines of availability, which meant that it would translate to a downtime of less than a few minutes in the entire calendar year. So that's the kind of rigor that we try and maintain. And to answer the other part of your question, when like the process of designing and architecting all of these systems, especially at this massive scale for millions and millions of users, you're truly thinking about it more like a responsibility, right? So the scale is definitely thrilling, but the weight of that scale is mostly translating to responsibility, is translating to ensuring that we do not lose the trust of our customers who are paying for all the software, and and knowing that real people rely on these systems to build all of their things on a day-to-day basis is a huge responsibility, and that's the inspiration.
Fascinating. Can you share a story of when a product or a platform that you've built really surprised you, where there was maybe an impact or something that you didn't think would happen?
Yeah. So several of them translating to societal impact was a huge surprise. I did not realize that there was so much of responsibility being thrust on a piece of code that that we are deploying on a day in day out basis. And I think the one revelation was post the 2019 midterm elections. All of our systems did extremely well, and the narration or the narrative from journalists and watchdog groups who were very vocal in criticizing our platform actually started to acknowledge some of those improvements. So that was an aha moment, a big moment. And I realized that we are not in the business of just tweaking algorithms. We are truly influencing community with all of this, working on a day in, day out basis for all of these users. So that was a huge eye opener for me. And and the trust factor, the responsibility factor, especially when it comes to society or a large community, I think was huge.
So you've been inside companies, that shape how we all live and work. What do you think AI is reflecting back about humanity right now?
AI reflecting about humanity, I think it is, it's going to look at all of our strengths and all of our blind spots. So, in my opinion, I think AI shows all of the creativity and curiosity for human beings, because AI is able to generate content, generate stories, generate code, and things like that. And at the same time, I think it also reflects all of our biases, all of our misinformation. So the way I see it is, I think AI is more like a magnifying glass. It does not really invent anything new. It learns everything from what we have given to it, what we have trained AI on, and it accelerates the journey of human beings to be more creative, to be better at problem solving, to be able to accomplish a lot more in a lot less time. And the way I, usually frame this is, AI is here to essentially lift the floor by taking over all the routine and mundane tasks that human beings were used to doing. However, the onus is actually on human leadership to raise the ceiling, right? A lot of times, like all of us focus on thinking too much about AI is taking over everything, be it code generation, be it automation and things like that. But what we don't realize is that the ability to truly make the right judgment calls, or to think through on the next creative problem to be solved, or to prioritize what is the next set of critical problems, all of this has to come from human beings and has to come from human being leadership. So that's how I see it.
And it kind of leads me on to another question, which is, where do you see enterprise AI heading in the next, 5 to 10 years? And I'm particularly interested in your thoughts of, large enterprises using large language models, large corporates creating their own small language models, or, lots of the work that I'm involved in now, creating customized data layers over a large language model to make the use of AI within an enterprise, a better experience because it's tailored to that organization. So what
Yeah,
are your thoughts on that?
yeah, that is actually a fantastic question. I think we are truly going through an evolution phase or a transformational phase where everything seems to be changing every other day. But over the next 5 to 10 years, I see enterprise AI, from being a feature that is being considered to be embedded into products to almost becoming the invisible fabric that runs businesses. In other words, just like how we saw the wave of SaaS over the last 10 to 15 years, early, I think, just like SaaS, I think AI workflows or AI embedded workflows being in every step of software that you're consuming is going to become prevalent. It's going to become more like a commodity. AI co-pilots, AI embedded workflows, AI integration is going to become truly invisible. Like I think most people might stop recognizing that AI is out there. So in that sense, it's going to become very much a commodity and very much like your internet, very much like your electricity, deeply embedded in every workflow. And the user, probably doesn't realize it subconsciously that it is driven through AI. Now, at the same time, I think that is exciting. But at the same time, what worries me there, I think, is the trust factor that, I was talking about earlier, right? As we deploy AI embedded workflows into every single product, into every single workflow, how do you guarantee or how do you ensure that that trust factor is not lost over time for all of those use cases and so on? So in that sense, if enterprises rush to adopt AI without the discipline of like what I was mentioning as the three great factors, right? If enterprises skip to assess the data quality, to assess the privacy guardrails, and not invest in the governance metrics, then they absolutely are going to risk eroding confidence within their community, within their users, and so on. And they're going to pay a huge price for it because recovering from that is going to be very, very hard. But 10 years from now, I also believe that most enterprises would have learned about implementing or getting those three great factors also right in the process is my assumption. And I'm hoping they all get it right because that's how they can leverage AI for the broader benefit. Yeah. So that's how I see it. And it's, if I have to use an analogy, I would say it's a bit like, aviation or airline industry, right? The first planes were truly thrilling, but if you truly want a mass number of people to start flying and leverage those planes, you got to have all of those safety standards, all of those guardrails for flight paths and, all of those protocols, all of that established and vetted out. AI will also have a similar arc, which is the companies, the platforms, the systems that build in the guardrails, build in the governance, make it a safe enough experience, a trustworthy enough experience, will see broader adoption, everybody starting consuming from it. So that's how I see it.
Interesting. And how do we actually make sure that as AI systems get more powerful, humans don't get left out of the loop? Speaking to some of the organizations that I work with and some of the project groups, you can see that there are individuals within those groups that have a lot of concern with regards to using AI themselves, but also utilizing AI platforms within their department.
Great question. Let me share again. I think continuing on the same analogy that I was using. Think of it like flying a modern aeroplane. Uh, 90% of the time, or maybe even higher, the autopilot can handle how the plane flies, but none of the passengers are going to feel safe if there is no pilot in the cockpit, right? The pilot is not there to steer the aeroplane every single second, but the pilot is there to guide, to override or to even make the right judgment calls when it matters the most, right? So I would use that exact same lens even for, answering your question, right? Human beings are going to be responsible for staying in the loop, for determining what problems we solve and how we make those critical judgment calls. And that's where human beings, so essentially, I think, is taking over the mundane, the routine, the ground level tasks so that human beings can focus more so on the more meaningful tasks is how I see it. And the underlying way is also that it's not really a man versus machine kind of contest. It is more about the way we should all think is it is what can human beings do more so with the machines, right? A man or a woman with machine rather than a man or a woman versus a machine. And to be able to leverage AI to do all of that grunt work, to do all of that routine work, and save your time to be able to focus on bigger, broader, more meaningful work items that is going to move humanity forward will be the focus of human beings and leadership. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I love that. A really positive view of what all of our futures, could be if we, didn't have to do repetitive tasks and could really bring that human creativity into, our work life. So you've led teams across the world. What have you learnt about leadership, about yourself throughout that journey?
Great question. And this is the most fascinating part because I get to learn from so many people, working with so many people. So I think for me, I think leadership is less about telling people what to do, but more about creating an environment where everyone, part of the organization, part of stakeholders gets to be doing their best work of their lives. So elevating, engineers, employees, organizations to take up bigger challenges, to be able to deliver bigger outcomes for our customers by getting inspired and being able to do the best work of their lives is the most gratifying part. And for me to do that as a leader, I got to inculcate a safe, inclusive workplace where everyone feels empowered and everyone feels inspired to do the right thing, even for the longer term. And if I'm able to align that with their own superpowers, nothing like it, right? That's the best mix because then the inspiration is going to be automatically flowing for every individual because it aligns very well with their own superpowers. So that's how I see it. And when you're truly able to get this working in an organization 8 out of 10 days or 8 out of 10 use cases that you're solving for, then the organization lens of how you're creating compelling value, how you're creating beautiful efficiency gains for the organization, all of that becomes more of a reality. You don't have to chase them down. It automatically happens because you're aligning based on people's strengths. You're creating an environment for everyone to thrive, and you're enabling everyone to focus on the bigger, longer term target state problem statements and things like that. So that's how I see it. Yeah.
Outside work, you're passionate about longevity and health span. What's one system or one idea that has changed the way you live your own life?
Great question. So, one idea that I write about in my newsletter also is the approach towards health and how you think of it like a product roadmap. You typically talk about product roadmap for engineering organizations and product organizations, but you don't apply that product rigor or product roadmap rigor to your own health or your own body. So why do I say that, right? At work, at companies, we never build anything. We don't plan to build anything and complete it in a single sprint. A sprint is typically 2 weeks. We would prioritize what is on the product backlog. We would lay out the milestones and then we will plan for things for the long game, and the long game could be a quarter or multiple sprints and so on. So Longevity also, in my opinion, works along the same lines. You don't have to chase every new trend, be it a diet or be it a fitness, exercise routine or whatever. You don't have to chase every new trend. If you're thinking about health, if you're thinking about longevity, have a roadmap for yourself. Focus on the big levers as your first step, and put some goals, put some North Star metrics, be it for nutrition, be it for your sleep patterns, be it for your movement or exercise, be it for, managing your stress and mental sanity and things like that. And once you have all of that covered in a good state, or you feel like you're on a stable state, then start to layer in different kinds of experiments, be it intermittent fasting protocols or wearables that can measure your progress along any of these dimensions that you're looking at. So, in my opinion, I think it's not about perfection. It is about getting into that rhythm, getting into that consistent direction where, you're thinking about it all the time like a roadmap, and incrementally working towards, improving or building the right habits quarter over quarter, for a healthier version of yourself with every passing day. And the quote I really love that I like is, small, daily, yet seemingly insignificant improvements, when you start doing them consistently over time, you're going to yield staggering results. Staggering results you would not even have anticipated or expected, because at the end of the day, consistency is the mother of mastery. That's how I see it. Yeah.
I love that. What a great quote. Consistency is is the mother of mastery. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Manoj. I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you about AI. It's been really fascinating to really dig into the AI projects that you've worked on, and also the teams that you've worked with. So thank you very much for your time. I think there's a couple of things that our listeners would love to see in terms of the structure and the framework that you put around safeguarding AI. Where could they find that information? Is it on your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, yeah. So I blog about AI trends and, all of these frameworks and everything on LinkedIn as well as on Substack. And, happy to share that with you. And if anybody in the audience is interested in sharing their thoughts or sharing anything, happy to receive it via LinkedIn. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. It was really lovely speaking with you. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you for an engaging conversation. I think your questions were awesome. So thank you.